Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for coming to tonight's webinar. And I'm seeing some old names that have been to many of these webinars, and I see a bunch of new names. So for those of you who are brand new to this webinar series, this is a monthly free webinar series, and every single month I'm tackling a new topic. And through my newsletter, you can sign up for each spot, and we'll be talking about the next one at the end. For those of you who are new, just type any questions that you have in the chat area and I will answer all of them at the end. I will not leave until all of your questions are answered. This presentation is a little bit longer than the past ones have been. Normally I like to keep them to be about 20 minutes of my talking and a bit longer for questions. This was going to be about 30-35 minutes of hearing me, and then we're going to talk questions. And thank you, Lise, for liking my shirt. I like this color too. And it's hot, so it's nice to be wearing something cool. There is a bit of some issues signing on, so if you came in a bit late, I will be sending out the recording afterwards, and I'll look into what that issue might have been. So let's get started. So what we're going to be talking about today is one of my favorite topics. It's the gut-brain connection. And we're going to be looking about how our brain and our digestion are connected and how symptoms are connected. We're also going to see how they reflect our mood, how our digestion, how our digestive symptoms can be a reflection of how we're feeling. As well as how our gut can affect our personality, which I find really cool, but also a connection to Alzheimer's and Parkinson's as a possible future treatment of early stage Alzheimer's and Parkinson's might be in the gut. But we're going to be spending a good chunk of our time, about half of our time, on how to balance your symptoms, because that's really why we're all here. It's great to know the information, but if you see yourself in this and say, you know what, there's a problem here, I need to fix this, we'll be talking about really simple and easy ways to find balance. So for those of you who are new, my name is Lisa Kilgore. I am a registered holistic nutritionist, and I've been so for 10 years. It was actually about 10 years ago right now. It was like we're within a couple days of when I took my final exam. And in that time, I've worked with thousands of clients. I lost count way around 1,000. That was years ago. And we looked at many different things. I have worked in most conditions at this point. I do specialize in digestion and difficult digestive cases, but I work with a lot of adrenal fatigue and exhaustion, as well as just simply trying to change your diet into something that is healthier and more balanced. And I personally did this myself. I had a very, very processed food diet in my teens and early 20s until it made me very sick and very tired. And I changed my diet very slowly over many, many years. And I found that that's what worked for me. Not everybody needs to take so long, but it does work. And I'm not on a diet. This isn't something I work at. It's simply how I eat and how to help me feel good. So that's kind of where I came from. And I love this topic because I find that it really affects me a lot. I use the stuff we're going to talk about on a daily basis to help balance both my digestive symptoms, but also my mood. So we're going to be looking at what I do, but what I've seen works really, really well with my clients. As I mentioned, you have any questions whatsoever, please type them into the chat area. I will be answering them at the end, just because some of you are going to be short on time, and I don't want to waste your time any longer than that. I'm really grateful you're here in the first place. So we're going to get through all of the information, and then those of you who can't stay, thank you so much for joining, and those of you who can stay for the questions, wonderful, and I'll be going through all of them at the end. So don't forget to if you think of something, just type it in. So the first thing we want to talk about is what is the gut-brain connection, because they're kind of like really separate areas. Like you don't really think about your gut and your brain being such close buddies. And we usually think of our brain, this big thinky brain, as orchestrating the rest of our body. What we've learned in the last little while, in the last 5, 10, 15 years, is there is quite a lot of information going from the gut to the brain instead of the brain going down to the gut. So we tend to think that this goes, all the information goes down, but actually the gut speaks to the brain much more so than the brain speaks to the gut. Our heart is the same. Our heart gives more information to the brain than vice versa. And this is a really important balance. Our gut also is the home of quite a lot of neurons, our brain cells. We have the largest concentration of brain cells outside of our brain down here in our gut. We have more brain cells here than we have in our spine, which is generally the other big concentration of brain cells. And this collection of neurons is called the enteric nervous system. And it's frequently referred to as the second brain. And the reason why it's referred to as that, because it really works on its own and it's very, very brain-like. And we're going to look at all the different ways why in a second. This collection of neurons are there because digestion is really, really complicated. If this brain was doing all of the tasks of digestion, of breaking apart the food we eat into single nutrients, into fats and proteins and antioxidants and minerals and vitamins and all of these things that we don't even fully understand at this point, then this brain would get overwhelmed, and we wouldn't have this space to be the humans that we are. We wouldn't have the creative power for language and art and music. We may not even have things like our community and buildings and roads and all of that sort of thing. So there's a really good reason why our gut brain takes over digestion, and it's fully independent. Our gut will work if there's no communication from our brain, but our brain suffers if there's no communication from our gut. And one of the reasons that this is happening is because we make a lot of neurotransmitters, which are brain chemicals down here in our gut. And there's a question of whether or not these neurotransmitters move. So there's some schools of thoughts that say, nope, they stay put. Yes, the gut makes neurotransmitters, but they don't affect the brain at all. Whereas there's a whole new school of thought that's saying, actually, they might move. I find that they're connected, but I'm not in any place to argue whether or not that's happening. We make about 70 to 90% of the serotonin, our feel-good neurotransmitter, in our gut. We make 50% of our dopamine, our reward neurotransmitter, in our gut. We make all of the different neurotransmitters, and they all have different jobs. Serotonin and dopamine are we make a lot of it because it has a big job. They create the muscle contractions that move food through our small intestine as well as our colon, or large intestine. And this is one of the reasons why digestive symptoms are so connected, and we're going to look at that a bit more in a few slides. We also have a huge community of bacteria in our gut. Until very recently, like within the last year, we thought that our bacteria really outnumbered us. So the running idea was we are about for every human cell, we have 10 cells of bacteria. So we're about 1/10 human. We're 10 times more bacteria. That's been challenged in the last year. So it might be as close to 1-to-1, but it's still a huge community, because you think about all the human cells that you have, and you have at least that many bacteria cells, and they work as a community. We call them the microbiome, and this community of bacteria plays a giant role. And we're going to be looking at the research that connects our gut bacteria to our neurotransmitters. And the first study I want to talk about happened with mice. And what they did is they wanted to look at whether or not the gut bacteria plays a role in the production of serotonin. So they took a group of mice that they birthed by C-section, which is a fully sterile method of birth, and they kept them sterile and then tested their serotonin levels. And what they found was those mice with no bacteria had 60% less serotonin than their mousy cousins that had their bacteria. And the good news is that when the bacteria was put into their guts, their serotonin levels went back right up to normal. The running thought of what's going on is that the bacteria triggers, like sends a signal through the intestinal wall for the production of these neurotransmitters. That's still, we're still figuring out exactly what's going on. And until very recently, we didn't know why serotonin and dopamine was in our gut. So everything that we're talking about, we're really on the edge of the science. Every year, every month, there's a new edge where it gets pushed out a little bit further and we know a little bit more. So just keep this in mind that like this study was done just 2 years ago. And then we have this next study, which also looked at mice. And this is one of my favorites. So with this study, they took a group of mice and they determined what their personality was. They grouped them into adventurous mice versus timid mice. And the way they did that is they had this big, large box and they had a light on one spot of the box and they put the mouse in, and if the mouse was timid, it would stay in the dark. And if the mouse was adventurous, it would go to the light. So it was, you know, a quite simple activity, but it was showing how adventurous they really were. Then they took their gut bacteria and they took the timid mice's bacteria and put it into the gut of the adventurous mice. And what happened was that mouse that now had timid bacteria suddenly became timid as well. When they took the adventurous mice bacteria and put it into the gut of the timid mouse, same thing happened. They became adventurous. This timid mouse became adventurous. So our gut bacteria is playing a role in our brains that we don't even fully get. How much our gut bacteria plays in who we are and what our personality is going to be uncovered, I think, in the next little while. It's really interesting. And then we have this study on toddlers. And what they did is they studied the bacteria balance, the full microbiome of a group of toddlers. And what they found was those toddlers that had what has been determined the healthiest gut bacteria, which usually means it's very diverse and it has specific bacteria that's in there. We'll talk about how to create that in a few slides. And what they found was the toddlers that had this healthy bacteria or more of this healthy bacteria also had more positive behavioral attributes. They were better at sharing, they were better at concentrating, and in boys, they were also linked to extroversion or being really outgoing. I was slightly offended by this study, to be honest, because I'm an introvert and I'm a proud introvert, and I don't see being not an introvert as being positive, like the fact that I'm not an extrovert being a negative thing. But it did actually open my eyes up into the idea that it might not be me that's an introvert, it's the gut bacteria that I got as a child that created this introversion, and maybe why that person, like different personality types do run in families. So we're really on this edge and we don't fully understand things, but what's really going on, but there's some connections that have been found. What the first connection that was found was about 60 to 70% of people with irritable bowel syndrome are also diagnosed with a mental health issue, mostly depression and anxiety. There's more work on this connecting depression and constipation and anxiety and diarrhea. And what happens here is the neurotransmitter balance. When we feel depressed, our neurotransmitters are low. And when they're low in our brain, they are frequently low in our gut as well. And what that leads to is a really depressed gut or a slow gut. Serotonin and dopamine affect the movement through the small and large intestine. So if those neurotransmitters are low, it does make sense that our gut will also be slow and not moving as well. When somebody has anxiety, they have an abundance of neurotransmitters. Their brain is just full, overwhelmed with neurotransmitters. There's an anti-neurotransmitter called GABA that our gut and our brain also makes that help calm that down. And so when that production isn't working very well, we'll get these anxious symptoms. In our gut, that means food is moving through really fast. So we get cramping and we get pain and we get diarrhea. And that's all due to the same effect as an anxiety. So I like to look at it as an anxiety attack in the gut. You see this more commonly and louder in children. A lot of children, their anxiety will come out as my tummy hurts. They'll vomit or just have really, really painful tummies. And I've seen this quite a lot. So just keep in mind, if you have school-age children and they're dealing with some digestive issues, just keep this in mind. It's not 100% accurate, because nobody is exactly the same as somebody else. But we can find a lot of balance in our diet. And what we're going to look at in a couple slides is how to find that balance. But I just want to touch on one little point before we get into the good stuff, and that's on Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. This is really on the edge. We don't understand this connection yet. We just know there is one. In a study recently published on Alzheimer's, a scientist spent most of his career working in a very remote tribe, I believe in the Amazon, but don't quote me on the place. They were just a remote tribe that lives in the rainforest. And he was, while he was out there and testing with them, he's doing a variety of different things with them. He found out that his uncle has Alzheimer's, and that made him look at this population and say, okay, does Alzheimer's exist here? And so they did genetic testing, and they found that people in this tribe also had the Alzheimer's gene, and the Alzheimer's gene gives you a much higher risk of getting Alzheimer's in your life, usually late stage Alzheimer's, so when you get older. And so but he wasn't seeing Alzheimer's. So he was looking at this population, many that were elderly, and they weren't developing Alzheimer's. And he found a connection that those with that gene, but also had a lot of parasites, which were very natural in that community, they actually had a protection against Alzheimer's. So that's really a really interesting point, I find, because the parasite took this gene that increases your risk of Alzheimer's, and actually that when the parasite is with that gene, then we have a much lower risk of Alzheimer's. The very few people that made it into that lifestyle and didn't have any parasites, which was very, very uncommon, but those who had the gene and no parasites had exactly the same risk as we have now of Alzheimer's. So there is a protection in that parasite against dementia, especially for those with this gene. And they don't really know exactly why, and we can't just take a parasite. If you have that gene and you're concerned, the issue is those parasites can wreak a lot of havoc, and the microbiome, the whole community, really matters, and that's what we don't understand yet. So hopefully in the future we'll have a better answer for that, of which parasites help, why do they help, and have an ability to help reduce that risk. Parkinson's is a little bit, we have an even earlier stage. What we know about Parkinson's is there is a change in your gut bacteria before Parkinson's symptoms show up. So in every case, I believe it's every case, it seemed very definite when I was reading the study. It looked pretty definite that they were finding a change in gut bacteria versus people without Parkinson's, but they don't know why. They don't know if the bacteria change sets the stage for Parkinson's, or early stage Parkinson's changes the gut bacteria, and we don't know yet. So those are two connections that keep your eye on the media. We're going to see more and more about that. What I love about the gut-brain connection is that it is being accepted in modern medicine. In the last few years, especially, there has been news article and mainstream newspapers looking at our gut as the next frontier for mental health. Because the truth is that we don't understand a lot of why our brain works the way it does, and our gut may be a place for us to find balance in early stages, and using our gut bacteria to create that balance. So how do we do that? So this is my favorite part. That's my favorite part, is getting into where this or how to actually create balance. And the good news is, when it comes to your gut bacteria, is that you can change it. No matter where it is right now, you can change it. Your gut bacteria is literally fed on your diet. Your gut bacteria eats nothing if you don't eat it. And we can make measurable changes in our gut bacteria in as little as 7 days. And this is the study I find the funniest of all studies I've ever read, because the studies took a group of people, changed their diet, noticed that within 7 days, they had a measurable change in their gut bacteria. Then they would go back on their old diet, and surprise, surprise, the gut bacteria goes back to normal. So the conclusion of that study is that we can't change our gut bacteria permanently. My conclusion is, yeah, you just have to change your diet. And I know it's hard to change your diet, and it's not the simple answer of just, change your diet. But what we can do is create little changes. And I'm going to talk about really simple things to shift your gut bacteria. And really small changes work. You can just do one of the things that I'm talking about, and things will start changing. The more you do, the more change you'll feel. So the first thing we want to look at is seeding our gut, because diversity is really important. And there's two really important parts of creating diversity. One is seeding the gut, and the other is feeding that bacteria, because the seeds are like grass seed. You put grass seed on your lawn, and if you just leave it there and you don't do anything else, it's not going to grow. But if you water and fertilize it well, if the soil is in a good place, then it will create a beautiful lawn. So seeding is an important step, but only one step. And so each part plays a role here. The food we eat is the water and fertilizer. And diversity makes a big difference. And when we have a low diversity in our gut bacteria, that usually means we don't have good bacteria coming in, and we're eating the same foods over and over again. That can lead to a higher risk of obesity, and they've connected a lower metabolism to low diversity. Autoimmune conditions are more common, allergies, as well as mental health issues like depression and anxiety. They just recently, on my Facebook page, I posted an article just recently on probiotics and its help with depression and anxiety. So probiotic supplements, they act as the seed. Yes, fermented foods have bacteria. We are going to talk about them. They are a very important part, but I don't feel that they can be the only seed that we bring in. In the very recent past, we had a lot more bacteria coming into our system. Our food had bacteria from the soil. Our sanitation wasn't so great. Our water wasn't so great. And I'll be getting into that connection and autoimmune conditions in a future webinar. I'm doing the gut immune connection, and just not having those bacteria in plays a huge role in autoimmune conditions. And so we need to replace that. That's where probiotics come in. Using a probiotic supplement every day for a while, and then even just once a week after that, is just giving you these seeds. And so minimum, I'd say once a week, and you want human strain probiotics with many different strains in them. The reason why you want human strain is that you want the type of bacteria that will actually go into our gut, adhere, and create a new community. You'd expect that probiotic supplements will do that, but they don't. Many probiotics are transient. That means they just kind of go through your gut. They're still beneficial. A transient bacteria, a lot of fermented foods have transient bacteria. They create a good environment. So there is benefit to that. But if you're taking a probiotic supplement, if you're buying a probiotic supplement, you kind of want it to be good seeds. And I like multi-strain probiotics because you don't know what your gut will want. Our gut bacteria is all very unique and different. So making sure that you're getting the right probiotic for you means not necessarily taking a whole bunch of single ones, is get multi-strain probiotics and try them out. And you want one that works for you. Big deal. If you have digestive symptoms, if you're dealing with some problems and you're taking a probiotic and you've been taking it for more than a couple months, it's not working for you. Try a new one. I usually give each probiotic about 4 to 6 weeks. And if you haven't seen at least a moderate change in your digestive symptoms, it's not the right one for your gut microbiome. Just try another one. And there's a whole bunch of great ones on the market. And then we want to feed it. And what they found is the more diverse your diet is, the more plant-based foods your diet has, the better diverse your gut bacteria is. The American Gut Project had found this, and American Gut Project's really cool as well. It's a it's a bunch of volunteers sending in poop samples, and they test them. And anybody can do it. I don't know if we can do it in Canada. I know in the US, you can just get a sample kit, send it in, and then find out what your gut bacteria looks like. Because it's called the American Gut Project, I don't know if they're taking samples from elsewhere. I should try because I want to find out myself. But what they found is they could tell the diet of people simply by the strains that they have in their gut. And the more plant-based food you have, the better the strains you have, the more variety you have in that diet, the more variety you have in your gut. That can be hard. And to create variety, there's a few little tricks. The first one is to change how you look at meals. Instead of thinking about what protein you want for dinner, think about what vegetable you want for dinner. And that can increase your plant-based foods right there. And we need more vegetables than anything else. So it's a really easy way of doing that. Then some of us, me included, can get into big food ruts. So I do that. I have vegetables as the centerpiece of my meals, but I can eat the same vegetables over and over and over again and not get tired of them. Many of you are not like this and will create variety on your own. I need some tricks. So the two ways I do that is the first one is I get a veggie delivery from a local farmer all summer. And out of that, I have a more limited scope of what I can buy. So it's a bit more, it's more seasonal. So things that I would normally eat, like I eat a lot of broccoli through the rest of the year. I can't get that from my farmer. So I'm creating diversity right there. And then he gives us an opportunity to get a random pick. It's called the farmer's choice. And you get a bigger amount when you buy into the farmer's choice, and you get something that you didn't ask for. And I found that I didn't do the farmer's choice for years. I did it this year, and I love the farmer's choice. This I got my veggie delivery today, and this one was radishes. I never buy radishes. So I've gotten a bunch of great new foods. The other thing I do is in the wintertime, I will buy a new fruit or vegetable, one a week for about a month, sometimes 2 months, depending on how ready I'm getting. Out of that, I find one or two stick, a few I don't like, and a few I like, but I forget about. But each time you get a bit more of a variety. So I usually find that every year I'll get 2, sometimes 3 new vegetables, sometimes 1, but it really does help increase variety. So just keep that in mind. As many plant-based foods as you want, fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, all of that, beans, just increase the variety. And then you want to add fermented foods. So the miracle grow for your gut bacteria is fermented foods, and you don't need much. You only need a serving or 2. And like for the fermented vegetables like sauerkraut or kimchi or properly fermented dill pickle, you just need like a tablespoon or 2 or like half a pickle. That's all you need. We also have the fermented dairies like yogurt and kefir. Yogurt, you want a good quality one, one that has like ingredients that you can understand, active bacterial cultures. Kefir is actually an even better version. Kefir has more bacteria as well as a more varied strains of bacteria. It's a fermented milk, so it's a lot thinner. You can add it to a smoothie, you can add it into your yogurt, and research has found that kefir makes the best and fastest change in your gut bacteria. So if you tolerate dairy, don't try it if you don't tolerate dairy, but if you tolerate dairy, kefir can be an easy one, and it's really easy to make it at home. It's also really easy to buy. I buy most of my fermented foods. Raw milk cheese, and raw milk cheese is abundantly available everywhere. If you go to your local health food store, like I'm in the Okanagan, if I go to Nature's Fair, they have a whole fridge dedicated to fermented vegetables, and they have beautiful yogurts and kefir as well as raw milk cheese. The first ingredient of a raw milk cheese will be either unpasteurized milk or raw milk, and it is safe. It has been fermented. It is fully legal. We can't have raw milk, but we can have raw milk cheese. It's much easier to digest. So if you have a mild dairy allergy, and it really is helpful. And if you have lactose intolerance, these are mostly lactose free. Mostly, they usually say. apple cider vinegar, and then we have the soys. We have miso, tempeh, natto. Miso is a paste. Tempeh is like tofu. It's wonderful. It's really lovely in a stir fry. Natto is slimy fermented soybeans. It's not the place to start. I wouldn't recommend jumping into natto unless you have a lot of inflammation. There's some really great enzymes in it, and unless you're really brave. I'm not brave enough for natto. We have sourdough bread, which is, if you're looking for sourdough bread, it's one that has no yeast in it. It will only have like sourdough culture or bacterial culture. If you can talk to the baker and confirm that they give a long rise to their bread, then it's okay if there's a bit of yeast. The yeast isn't a problem. The yeast just usually shortens the rising time, and you want a long rise. You want like there's like a 12 plus hour rise when it comes to properly done sourdough breads, and those are guaranteed if they only use a sourdough starter. This allows gluten to be more digestible, and this makes your gut so much happier. Then we have wine and beer. These were our very first fermented foods. They aren't the best for changing your gut bacteria, but they are fermented foods. There is a gentleman in the US that loves beer enough that his gut has taken on the yeast that makes beer. And now every time he eats carbohydrates, he makes beer in his gut and he gets drunk. So don't overdo those ones, but they are fermented foods. And last but not least, or second last but not least, there's one more slide after this, is healing your gut. If you do have gut issues like a leakiness or immune system issues, which we'll talk about more in a few webinars from now, we do want to do some healing of the gut. If we're thinking about our lawn, we have the seeds of the grasses, the probiotic, we have the food, like the fermented foods and the plant-based foods as the water and fertilizer, and your gut intestinal walls is the soil. So you want good soil so these can adhere and create a new colony. Healing your gut is a lot easier than it seems. There is a time where it's a lot harder if you're dealing with a lot of issues, but most of the time it's not overly difficult. Homemade bone stock, when you make it yourself and you simmer it for 12 to 24 hours and you add a splash of vinegar, it creates this beautiful healing food, like unbelievably healing food. It has gelatin, which heals the gut, and it's full of minerals. But if you're a vegetarian or it's 35 degrees in your house like it is in mine right now, hence the tank top, and you don't want a pot of hot simmering soup, aloe vera juice works quite well. Or if you're vegetarian or vegan. Aloe vera juice works just like if you put aloe on a burn. It heals and soothes your intestinal walls, about 4 ounces a day. It's particularly helpful if you have esophageal burns. If you have a lot of heartburn and you're getting burns down your esophagus, really, really helpful. If you're dealing with a lot of digestive issues or you're healing your gut, you want more cooked veggies than raw. Again, it's August. That's not necessarily the nicest thing for me to say. But if you are struggling digesting raw foods, it's because they're hard to digest, and bringing in some cooked veggies help. And then you do want fermented foods, even if you're dealing with an imbalance like candida. Your gut needs properly done fermented foods, and they work really well. You just need 1 serving a day. You don't need 1 serving of a bunch. You just need one that you like and one that you'll have every day. And last but certainly not least is an actually eating method for your mood. I use this on a daily basis, and I find it works like a charm. With my clients, it's about 50-50. It works for some, and it doesn't do a lot for others. This is out of the work by Dr. Carol Hart. She's a PhD who wrote a book, Secrets of Serotonin, about 9 years ago. And I've used this over and over and over again with my clients. And again, it does seem to be fairly effective. If it's not effective for you, there's no harm. It's just how you eat. So breakfast makes the biggest difference. And so that's something to keep in mind, is what you eat for breakfast can set the stage for the rest of the day. And starches for breakfast. So that could be oatmeal, it could be quinoa, it could be sweet potatoes or yams. It's one of my favorite breakfasts. They will pull your serotonin up by about 10%. Even just fruit for breakfast will do this. But if you add any protein, then that will pull your serotonin levels down. So what you want is, if you're dealing with depression and you're dealing with low serotonin levels, you want those starches. You want that bringing up of your serotonin levels. But if you're dealing with anxiety, you may have already noticed that a high protein diet makes you feel better. And that's because it's pulling those serotonin levels down by 35%. It's a huge amount it's bringing it down. But right now, protein is in all the rage. It's totally in fashion. And yes, food is fashionable. There's no question that food goes in and out of style. And protein is a king. So we are putting in protein with every single meal, and people dealing with depression, especially if they're on a very high protein diet, will deal with much lower mood and significant and severe sugar binges as your body's attempt to regulate and balance out this low level of serotonin. So experiment a bit. I'm wired for depression. We're generally wired when we come into this world, one way or the other. That doesn't mean we don't feel the opposite. People with IBS tend to teeter-totter back and forth. So generally, my mood is low, but it can get anxious as well, depends on the situation. So most days I have a very starchy breakfast, and I find that when I have a starchy breakfast, and a healthy starchy one that's full of fibers and whole grains or whole starchy vegetables, I feel fantastic, and my sugar cravings are lower, and my energy is better, and I feel more satisfied. On the same sort of day, if I instead have a high protein breakfast, exactly what on paper looks fantastic, exactly what I'm supposed to be eating, I will be hungry really quickly. All I'll want is cookies. I'll spend my day thinking about cookies, and I just out of balance. And although when I'm really nervous or when I'm really worried or anxious, and then that's when I have a lot of protein, and it calms my gut down and it calms my brain down. So experiment with where you're at. Do you need starches or do you need protein? And breakfast makes the biggest difference, but you can use this at any time in the day. If you're dealing with an anxiety attack, have some protein, not maybe at that moment, but soon after, just to kind of calm things down whenever you can be eating. So that's everything I wanted to talk about today. So I already see a bunch of questions already in, but keep writing them in, because I'm going to answer all of your questions before you go. I just wanted to mention a couple things. I am a holistic nutritionist. I do take one-on-one clients. So if you find yourself struggling either with what you're eating, or you see something here and you're like, yeah, that looks good, but I need some help, please don't hesitate to contact me. I am still taking clients online through Skype and FaceTime. Some in Kelowna, I have limited space left, and some in Penticton, I have limited space left. So do contact me if you're interested. And we have September's webinar coming. The next one is 5 reasons why we crave sugar. So we're going to be looking at sugar not as the demon, not as the thing we need to get rid of, but why are we craving it, and how do we find balance without eating a bag of marshmallows? How to respect this body's drive for something sweet. And so we're going to be doing that. We're going to be there on September 25th talking about this. When I send the recording out, I'll also have a link so you can grab your spot. As well, I would love your feedback. Are you enjoying these webinars? Are there any topics that you want me to cover? Do you want me to continue them into 2018? I'm making my plans up for next year. So let me know if you want this to continue, but also if you have some ideas or some topics that you would love to hear about. So let's dive into the questions. So keep writing your questions, and I will, let me see if I can get to the first one, go through them all. For those of you who can't stay for the questions, thanks so much for joining. I really appreciate your time tonight. For those of you who aren't, as I said, I promise to answer them all. Okay, so the first one, where is that? Kenda is asking, wondering if there's a split screen for video, presentation, and chat. I'm not sure what device you're on your laptop. It is all split, but I need to see what my iPad isn't working, so I have no idea what it looks like on tablets. But if you want to let me know, I can see if I can adjust that. So if you take a screenshot of what you're looking at and send it to me, I will try to adjust it. I'll see what I can do to adjust it for next time. She also asks, what if you don't have a large intestine? How does this affect you, the neurons, enteric system, missing bacteria? So great question, Kenda. Your large intestine is where most of your bacteria lives. The most of the, like the biggest colony of your bacteria does live in your colon, but the most important colony of bacteria lives in your small intestine. So it's in your small intestine that this conversation is happening. At least the conversation with your immune system, the gut, there you'll still have all of those neurons. That enteric nervous system is still there. Otherwise, your small intestine wouldn't work at all. This brain only controls your stomach. Everything else is up to the enteric nervous system. So you still have all of those. You should still be affected by your balance of gut bacteria. But if you're dealing with neurological symptoms since losing your large intestine, that could be due to just an imbalance that was created during the operation, or it might be just that missing bacteria. And we don't know that yet. They haven't really looked into it. We're just, as I said, on the very, very early stages. I'd love to hear your story and what you're feeling after that. And I just curiosity. I love knowing what's going on. And then also, if I see something that might affect you, I'll keep you in mind and send that to you. She also asks, can we have your research article list? Yeah, absolutely. Send me an email, lisa@lisakilgour.com. It's on the screen, and I'm more than happy to send you the research. They're on the slides, but they're really small. So yes, I'm happy to send you that. Caroline is asking, let me just raise that up. Is there a connection between SIBO and the brain? So SIBO stands for small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And this is a gut issue that's really focused on the small intestine. And the main symptom, but by far not the only symptom, the main symptom is bloating and gas, like balloon up. Generally, people with SIBO will talk about how visibly bloated they are. The small intestine is like 23 feet, and so it can, when it blows up like a balloon, it takes up a lot of space. And so there isn't, again, any research on which part of the small, is it the small intestine or the large intestine that's having the most effect on the brain. I haven't seen that research yet. But it does make sense when there's a gut bacteria imbalance, and in the small intestine, it's an overgrowth, but it's an overgrowth of the wrong ones should affect it. Getting SIBO under control is always important because it's causing so many other issues, but it can be a difficult one. Those bacteria like to live underneath biofilms, and they're hard to get at. But there is we're getting more and more effective treatments. The word SIBO wasn't even spoken of very often, even 5 or 6 years ago. I had a client who brought information about it to her doctor, and he had never heard of it. So I can't say that they have found a direct connection, like that SIBO causes neurological imbalances, but it would make sense, just like any other gut bacteria imbalance, that it would cause some. Lise is asking, how do you know if it's human strain? That's a good question. Generally, the company brags about it. So when the company that's making the probiotic puts the money in for human strain probiotics, they tell you either on the label or in their pamphlet. You can also, I personally don't know which bacteria is the human strain and which ones aren't. But generally, like, just take a look at the company's information and they'll tell you whether or not it's human strain or not. Kenda asked Kenda about the American Gut Project. They don't do it here. The last time I checked. Thank you. I want to harass them so we can get it up here, because wouldn't that be fun? Fun for holistic nutritionists. I don't know if seeing the bacteria in your poop is fun for anybody else. I should remember that. Linda's asking, is apple cider vinegar okay? Yes. So apple cider vinegar that is unpasteurized, that comes with the mother, is a fermented food. It can also help with digestion. So if that's your fermented food, about a tablespoon a day is beautiful. Annabelle says, loves the webinars. Oh, that's great. I'm glad to hear that. The topic suggestion, diet, thyroid, great. I'll keep those in mind. I'm really happy that you guys like them. I really enjoy them, but I just want to make sure that you guys are getting what you want. Lise is also asking, could you explain what a healthy good looks like and what are the symptoms of an unhealthy gut? Great, that's a great question. So a healthy, balanced gut generally has no symptoms. indigestion is just so common. Having some digestive issues is so common that it's hard to say you'll never have them, because we also eat too fast and stress while we eat and all those kind of things. But generally, you can assume your gut bacteria is out of balance if you're dealing with gas, bloating, irregularity, either constipation or diarrhea, cramping, pain, food sensitivities, even seasonal allergies can be connected to a gut bacteria imbalance. And again, watch the gut immune connection one, because we'll get into that into detail. There are so many different symptoms. We almost can assume in North America, if you haven't worked at fixing it, you might be off. If you've had antibiotics twice in your life, then that second time changed your gut bacteria permanently. I use permanently in quotation marks because I'm assuming they haven't fixed it, and it is fixable, so we want to fix it. So almost any digestive symptom, even things like heartburn and acid reflux, there is a small population of bacteria in your stomach. I can't say there's any specific research on the connection. When I look at heartburn or acid reflux, I'm looking at other aspects, but bringing in better bacteria in the stomach can also help. So almost every form of indigestion, especially irregularity, gas, bloating, pain. Let's see what else we have. Lily is saying diet and osteoarthritis. Fantastic, great idea. Linda is saying my sauerkraut is just cabbage and salt. Is that fine? That is exactly what you want. So good quality sauerkraut is just cabbage and salt, but you want it unpasteurized. So there are some really good sauerkrauts that were fermented and then they were pasteurized so they can be shelf stable, so they can sit on the shelf. They're still pretty good. The result of the fermentation is really good for your gut, but if you want that added hit of bacteria, it needs to be unpasteurized. And there's a whole bunch of great brands on the market right now. Bubby's and Cartines are the two that are kind of across the country. And then there's a whole bunch of local brands. So just check the refrigerator in your health food store. But if you have a sauerkraut that's just cabbage and salt, that means it has been fermented. If it's been pasteurized, the bacteria is gone. If you have a sauerkraut that has vinegar in it, then it is, they've added vinegar to shorten the fermentation process. They're using vinegar to get that sour taste when it should be done by bacteria. Candace said, thank you for all your great questions. Dell is asking, what about powdered fermented greens like Genuine Health's fermented whole foods in a smoothie? Would that give you enough for your daily needs? And the answer is yes. A fermented green food, actually Genuine Health fermented green food was my very first fermented food, and I wasn't expecting a big difference because I'd spent a decade working on my gut. I was shocked at the difference. And so that became my everyday fermented food for a long time because it was just really easy. And then that gave me a taste for fermented food. So then I started buying sauerkraut and getting tempeh regularly, making salad dressings with miso. And so it really sparked my craving for fermented foods. So that is, and there's a few fermented greens on the market right now. They're really good. So if you find that's an easier way, or if you're already using a green food, then yeah, fermented food is helpful. Peggy is saying, unfortunately, we cannot see your video, but can we still see it on the computer? So when I send out the recording, you're going to get it the way that I'm seeing it on my laptop, which is the video, the chat, as well as the PowerPoint. So you're going to get everything in the recording. So I'm sorry for the weirdness today. I think it's just August. Something's going on right now. Let's see. Kenda is asking, thought it would be cool a tool, especially to see the dissection of your own microbiome and how it changes over time. Yeah, the American Gut Project would be amazing to be a part of, just so we can see our own microbiome and see how it changes. Maybe we need a Canadian Gut Project. Yvonne says, thank you, Yvonne. Yvonne's an old friend of mine. It's really nice to see your name pop up. Kristen says, what are the serving sizes for the different kinds of fermented foods? Really great question. Sauerkraut is a few tablespoons. The yogurt would be like half a cup to like whatever you actually want to eat. Kefir depends on the strength of the kefir, so it's about quarter to half a cup of the more thinner kind. There's one kefir that I think is made by Liberté that is bubbly. It has like a effervescentness to it. It's really strong, and it's like 1 billion bacteria per tablespoon. So with that stuff, especially if you have a gut issue, you want to start with really small doses and slowly work your way up. But that would be like a tablespoon or two. You wouldn't need much more than that. Miso would be like a tablespoon. Tempeh, whatever serving size you want to eat of it. It's not really an exact science. You just want to get it in. And I found just like gobbling down a tablespoon or two of sauerkraut made a big difference. Using 1 serving of a fermented green powder made a big difference. You do what you get, something you like, and just get it in every day. And the serving size can be kind of balanced to what you need. Let's see. Ange is saying, can you heal your gut that seems prone to gastritis? Do you use your suggestions from this webinar? Are there more? When it comes, so gastritis is mostly inflammation of the stomach. It's a really painful one. Ange, I've worked in it quite a lot, or at least I've had a handful of very strong gastritis clients, and it's really unique to each person. When your stomach is inflamed, it can be very testy, and it only likes certain things, otherwise it gets really upset. So generally that would need a bit more of a targeted individual kind of conversation. You could try what I've recommended, see how your gut is, but be very gentle and very kind. Your stomach is also highly connected to stress, because this brain it controls your stomach. So any stresses really can trigger symptoms. So when you're trying something, you need to be really relaxed. It is definitely something for a larger conversation, but those are some tools that can help, but they generally help better with a small intestinal or large intestine issue. These saying very nice things is nice. Thank you. I think that's all of the questions. You guys have been an amazing audience. Thank you so much for all of your questions. Thank you for spending the evening with me. I'm going to stick around. If you have any last questions, please leave them in. I'm going to stop the recording, but I'll stay on and answer any more questions that come up. So thank you guys so much, and have a lovely rest of August, which I guess ends tomorrow. I have one more day. And I'll see you in September. Bye-bye.